When we were growing up, we had black and white television, we had 3 channels, if we were lucky, and no remote control. Now, these days, we carry tiny computers in our pockets called mobile phones, and we can watch almost anything on demand. Some of these changes are brilliant. They're really good. Others, well, they make you wonder whether we've lost something along the way. In today's episode, we're going to explore how life isn't quite the same as it used to be. So what's better? What's worse? And what does it all mean for how we live now? Welcome to
Aprender Inglés with Reza and Craig.
Hello and welcome to the podcast, especially if you're a new listener. My name's Craig.
And my name's Reza.
And with nearly 60 years of teaching between us, we'll help you improve your English and take it to the next level. How are you doing, Reza?
I'm feeling good, although ever so slightly nervous about the workmen who potentially might make some noise beside us. Are you?
Well, we'll see what happens. Hopefully we won't be interrupted by drilling and banging. But if you do hear that, then you have been warned. That is one of the dangers of podcasting when there's builders in the building. But speaking of things not being the same as they used to be, which is the topic of today's podcast, if you remember, Reza, before the internet, if you wanted to study English, you had very few choices. You had to go to an academy physically and sit in a classroom. And maybe there wasn't an academy close to where you live. But that's all changed, hasn't it, with platforms like italki?
Yes, and we'd like to thank italki for sponsoring this episode. Let me tell you a little bit about them. italki offer a platform where you can get private lessons tailored to your own individual needs. They've got a very wide variety of teachers. They've got native speaker accents, they've got people with specialities, different degrees of qualification, and prices to suit every budget.
That's right. So whether you're preparing for an exam, or maybe you want to study business English, or any speciality, any kind, any flavour of English, I'm sure you'll find a teacher for your needs on the italki platform. And another advantage to italki is the flexibility, because you can schedule your classes whenever and wherever you want. If you're on holiday, doesn't matter. You can still study English. There's no weekly or monthly subscription because you pay per class. So you're always in control. If this sounds interesting, if you're looking for a private teacher and you're not sure which platform to trust, we suggest going to italki. Just go to the link in the show notes for this episode, which is inglespodcast.com/599, and sign up for free, and you can book your first class. And there's a promotional offer, isn't there, Reza?
Yes, if you use the promotional code INGLES12, that's in capitals, INGLES 12, Ingles 12. And when you pay for your first lesson, you'll get a €5 discount on your first class of at least €10.
And it's getting near Christmas, so if it's not for you, maybe someone you know, a friend, a family member will be interested in a lovely present of some English lessons. And thank you so much to italki for sponsoring Aprender Inglés with Reza and Craig. So what's first this week, Reza?
First, we got some feedback from listeners, which is what we like most of all about the podcast. We got a voice message from Maria, who has just passed the C2 level exam.
And she also suggested today's topic, so let's hear what Maria has to say.
Hello, my name is Maria. I have recently discovered your podcast right after passing my C2 English level exam. It's a pity, but doesn't matter. It's a wonderful way of keeping learning English and practicing it. And as you, I'm getting on a bit. I think we are about the same age. I think that's why I resonate with your stories, with your jokes, and everything you talk about. And I would like to suggest talking about those things that have changed and they're not as they used to be anymore. For example, when you were talking about black and white, the black and white TV, of course, I know what you're talking about, and living without a mobile, so on. And that's all. Just thanking you for your wonderful podcast. And I really, really enjoy it.
Well, thank you very, very much for your message, Maria. It was lovely to hear from you, and congratulations on passing C2. That's fantastic, isn't it?
Wow, yes, C2. Not many people get up to that level. And I understand that you passed first time. Did you know that most people actually failed the C2 the first time they did it? So, wow, well done, Maria.
Yep, excellent. And I really like the expression you used in your message, we're getting on a bit. If you're getting on a bit, that means you are advanced in years, let's say, that you're no spring chicken. So I think, Reza, we'd agree with Maria that we are getting on a bit as well.
Well, you say you might be about the same age as us. Your voice sounds much younger than us.
It does, yeah, that's true.
I'll tell you that, Maria.
Much younger. So things are not the same as they used to be. Let's look at some things that have changed over the years, and we'll see what you think about these comparisons with the way things used to be in the past and the way things are now. And at the end, maybe, Reza, we could decide if we think life is better now than it was in the past. But first, let's look at some expressions you can use when you're talking about things in the past.
So let's start with a very common expression that people like to use, particularly when they're being nostalgic. That's thinking about the past in a nice, positive way, thinking, oh, they were different times, they were good times, oh, it was easy then, that type of feeling. People will say things like, back in the day, there was no internet, no streaming. It was just a black and white TV. And if you wanted to watch the news at 7 o'clock, you had to be in front of the TV at 7 o'clock. Oh, back in the day.
I like to say that expression in an old man's voice. Back in the day. I remember back in the day. A similar expression is way back when. So way back when there were black and white televisions, there was no colour. In my day is another expression. And back then, you can say, back then or way back then, if it's a long, long time ago.
I would single out for special attention in my day. That one for me of the four you've just mentioned is the one which most implies that, oh, it was better when I was young. Yeah. So all of them could be interpreted to mean life was better, but not necessarily, just different. But when you say, in my day, yeah, and you tend to stress the word my when you say it, in my day, it's like, oh, you think what you have to do is difficult or easy or fun or whatever. What I'm going to say is more extreme. So it's a way of kind of trying to impress someone, isn't it? When you say, in my day, it was more fun, it was more extreme, it was more difficult, it was more something in my day.
Back in my day, absolutely. Another expression you can use is in the old days. In the old days, not the modern day time or the modern times or now or nowadays, but in the old days. And that's usually a positive thing. And you add the word good in the middle. So in the good old days. I remember in the good old days when neighbours used to talk to each other, for example.
Although, Craig, would you agree that sometimes people say in the bad old days? Sometimes you do hear
Sometimes, that. Yes, that's true.
But it's far more common to hear in the good old days.
Exactly. Or just in those days. In those days, way back when.
Yes, by the way, the word those, be careful that the word those, people often forget, those is the plural of that. There's such a lot of confusion with Spanish speakers between those and these and this. Maybe it's because of the pronunciation. So if something's close to you, it's this. And if it's far away, it's that. Yeah. The plural of this is these. Make it a bit longer. So the plural of that is those. So we're talking about days, plural. So in those days.
And there's also some confusion with the expressions used to and would when you're speaking about the past. We use used to plus the infinitive of the verb. Used to go, used to have, used to do, used to be, when we're talking about any action or any state. Well, what's a state? Well, a state, you're not actually doing anything specific like eating or driving or speaking. A state is, well, for example, we live, don't we? So if we're living, that's a state that we are in. We're not dead, we're living. So you can use it for states and you can use used to for actions. However, with would, only use it for actions. For example, we would play in the park in the good old days. We would ride our bicycles in the good old days. We would eat as a family, everybody together. So when you're speaking about actions, you can use would, but don't use would for states.
Yes, for example, as a state, you could say, I used to be really slim. It's true, by the way, listeners.
Yeah, me too. I used to be really slim.
Not now, but
in the good old days.
Exactly, back in the day. I used to be, but you can't say I would be in this case because being slim is not an action, it's a state. So you can't say I would be. No, you have to say I used to be slim because it's not an action, it's just a state.
So Reza and I were slim when we were young or when we were younger. So that's another expression you can use to talk about the past. When we were young.
Or to be a little bit more perhaps funny or sarcastic, we could say, when I was a lad. People tend not to use that seriously. You know that someone's going to say something funny. Like, oh, you think life's hard these days? When I was a lad, oh, you could be shot dead just for speaking back to your parents, you know? Clearly exaggerating. So people often say, when I was a young lad, or for women, when I was a young lass, to be sarcastic or funny about the past.
And to quote Monty Python, when I was a lad, we lived in a box in the middle of the road. Life was hard. You can use the expression a long time ago. And if you are a listener of the podcast for a long time, you will probably remember that ago tends to be a time expression used with the past simple. So don't make the mistake of using ago with present perfect. A long time ago, we lived in a different village. A long time ago, people spoke to each other at the bus stop or on the train, for example.
Another interesting word you can use is the word heyday. I better spell that. It's Heyday. And if somebody talks about their heyday or someone else's heyday, they're talking about a long time ago when they were at their best, at their peak. There's the implication that not only was it a long time ago, but it was their best time. So imagine a 90-year-old Hollywood actor who doesn't get out much these days. They stay at home, obviously, because they're very old. But in their heyday, they were never off TV. Everybody was writing about them. Everybody wanted to be seen with them. Not now, but yes, in their heyday.
In their heyday. You can also use the expression in one's prime, in your prime or in my prime or in Razor's prime. If you're in your prime, that's the best time of your life, the best physically, in your best physical condition, and also maybe mentally as well. So what did you used to do in your prime that you don't do now? My example would be in my prime, I used to sleep all night without needing to go to the toilet when I was in my prime.
Me too. That's not ever having. I can remember, not ever having to get up for a pee now. That's just a distant dream.
A long time ago.
Those were the days.
Those were the days. That's another expression. Those were the days when you remember something fondly, when you remember something positively, you can say, yes, those were the days when we only had 3 or 2 channels on the television and we had less choice of what to watch, but the programs were good.
Now, Craig, as listeners, regular listeners know, we are both, but particularly you, if I might say, big fans of chocolate.
You might say that.
You might say that. And in our time, we've eaten a lot of chocolate biscuits. But you know what? There's certain brands, I won't name them for legal reasons, but I think they don't make them like that anymore. There's certain brands that have disappeared. You can't get them anymore. And the things that substitute them these days, they're just not the same. They're not the same quality. They're smaller. There's not as much chocolate. I don't know what it is, but they don't make them like that anymore.
Let's take a quick break here because I know you listen to this podcast to take your English to the next level. But what about your speaking? Is your fluency improving? Are you happy with your speaking skills? My conversation course focuses on making you a more confident and more fluent English speaker. You'll join me and a small group of motivated students, and we'll meet on Zoom and have topical discussions, role plays, debates, and presentations that will expand your vocabulary and help you express yourself effectively in English. So be proactive and take the first step towards becoming a confident and fluent English speaker. Send me an email today to craig@inglespodcast.com and I'll send you details of the next online conversation course. Thanks for listening. Now let's get back to the podcast. So let's compare a couple of things, Reza, that have changed over time. Back in the day, we used to use encyclopedias and paper dictionaries. We had books on the shelves that we used to use for reference purposes. And of course, now we use search engines, Google, AI, and other software and the internet. When was the last time you used a paper dictionary to look up a word?
Well, maybe not a dictionary, but Craig, just to remind you, I'm using a paper encyclopedia right now.
Yes, can you explain to the listeners what you're using it for?
Both of us, in fact. I'm not joking, listeners. Honestly, it's just a coincidence. We have put the microphone stands on top of a couple of very thick encyclopedias because they were too low on the table, so we needed to raise them. So we're actually using a couple of paper dictionaries that I have on my shelf just because I think they look nice. They got a really nice cover on them, so I've kept them, but I don't actually use them anymore except when we record podcasts at my house and we need to raise the microphone.
Maybe that's the only use that those thick dictionaries and encyclopedias have these days. I don't remember the last time I opened a dictionary to check a word. I use my phone and I use online dictionaries and resources.
I had to do it about a year ago because my phone wasn't working and internet was down for some reason. So I had no choice. I had to do some assignment for my Valencian class. And so the deadline was upon me. So I had no choice but to use a paper dictionary. Yeah, no internet and no smartphone. So I had to use a paper dictionary. But I wouldn't have chosen to do it, I guess.
Yeah, I suppose they're good for a backup, but I wouldn't like to rely on paper dictionaries these days. Another thing that's changed is the way children spend their free time. Back in the day, when I was young, we used to play in the street. We rode our bikes, we played football in the park, we used to hang out together, which means we used to spend time together in the street, just joking around or talking or playing some kind of sports. And of course, these days, it's very common for children to be indoors, inside the house, watching a screen.
Yeah, there was much less screen time then. In fact, my parents were quite strict about how much TV I could watch, although I think also it was partly a question of ownership. I couldn't watch my programs. They had preference. There was only one TV set and there was no streaming. So occasionally when there wasn't anything in particular they wanted to watch, they would say, okay, then you can put on whatever series it was I wanted to watch. For example, that probably would have been Starsky and Hutch, my favorite when I was a kid.
Starsky and Hutch, yeah. We won't mention too many because I'm sure younger listeners would not have heard of those programs. Another area, of course, is writing letters. We don't do that anymore, especially by hand. We tend to send emails and, of course, instant messaging. We're doing that these days, and we don't tend to write letters anymore. Do you think, Reza, we're losing the ability to write? Have you noticed that messages are so short? We use abbreviations, we use emoticons.
Probably most of us, but I can think of someone who's probably an exception to that. Maria, whose message we heard earlier. Because Maria, if it was the Cambridge C2 exam you did, I'm presuming it was, the proficiency, you still have to be able to write a letter.
But you can take the computer-based exam.
Yes, but there's no option of writing an email. You write a letter on a computer. I know it's hard to believe. Listeners are thinking, no, he's wrong. That's not right. Believe me, I teach C2 level classes and Cambridge have not changed it. And one of the specifications, one of the possibilities is write a letter. There is no possibility of writing an email. It doesn't exist in the exam.
Yeah, that's true.
It's only a letter. Wow, that is mind-blowingly old-fashioned that they haven't changed that.
Yeah, that sounds a lot like Cambridge to me. One change that I do really like is maps to sat-nav, satellite navigation. Now, I hated using paper maps. I could never find my way. I used to get lost all the time. And when I was traveling, it was a nightmare. I used to argue with my wife when we got lost. Of course, now with satellite navigation, with Google Maps, it's so much easier to find your way to places. So I absolutely love Google Maps.
I see your point, but I have to disagree. I have always been a huge fan of paper maps. I have what I would call a collection of paper maps. I've always loved maps. I just like the look of them, the feel of them, and I'm very good at using them. So I'm good at using sat-nav as well, but it takes the fun out of it. I liked it when you
like
were
getting
moving
lost.
this paper upside down. You accidentally poked your finger through the middle of it and then you couldn't find what you were looking for, all that. It rained on it and it got ruined. It was all good fun.
I like looking at maps, but I don't like using them. I always get lost. What's another big change, Reza?
Oh, well, a big one is definitely digital payments. It could be online or simply, prepare yourself, younger listeners, could be the use of bank cards. I remember bank cards coming in. I was young, but when I was a kid, I'm pretty sure they hadn't been invented when I was born. Bank cards came in perhaps round about 1980.
Yeah.
Round about that. So I'm not talking about online. Forget about internet. Just being able to put a card in a machine and get money out. Before that, you had to go inside the bank.
Write a check.
Write a check. All sorts of funny things. Or use cash. Not that long ago.
I think it was Diners Club who had the first credit card, if I remember rightly, way back when. Yes, and I think cash is slowly disappearing. I don't think cash is going to be around in the next 20 years. I'm pretty sure it's going to disappear.
I don't know about that because for illegal practices, cash is still king.
Bitcoin.
As well, of course.
Bitcoin for illegal payment.
That's true.
Cooking from scratch. If you do something from scratch, you do it from the beginning. So you get the basic ingredients and you make a meal from the original vegetables that you buy in the market. And gradually you cook a nice meal. However, these days, it's very common to go to the supermarket and buy a ready meal. What's a ready meal, Reza?
So as the word ready suggests, it's ready to eat. All you've got to do is possibly just open the packet and eat it, or at most heat it up in a microwave. So put it in the microwave, turn that on for 2 minutes and eat it.
They're not very healthy, are they?
Well, if it's a salad, I guess, if it's a ready to eat salad, that's not too bad, I guess. But generally things you have to heat up in the microwave, they don't tend to be too healthy, do they?
Delivery apps, that's another quite recent invention or innovation. Globo is very popular in Spain. So you just get the food delivered from the restaurant right to your door. I suppose that's quite convenient.
Craig, what do you think about old paper photographs? Are you a fan or are you more a digital fan?
I like both. I do like photograph albums. I have a few from back in the day. But I also like digital photos. So I have photos in my computer. So the advantage, of course, with digital photos, apart from digital cameras being very easy to use and probably more efficient than the old film that we used to have is that they don't discolor. They're not affected by the sun. You can make copies of them and you can easily share them with friends. You don't have to send a paper photo in the post.
Yet still many people today, even people who handle technology very, very well and with no problem, they like to have a little photograph of people who are dear to them in their wallet or things like that. Even people who are tech fans. Have you noticed that?
I do. Yeah, I have photos in my wallet of my wife. Yeah, and my sister. Yeah, that's true. What about music, Reza? Back in the day, we had record collections, vinyl records. After that, cassette tapes, and also CDs. And now it tends to be music streaming these days. How do you listen to music these days?
I must admit, I often listen to music on things like YouTube or Spotify or things like that.
But you do have CDs.
I do have CDs, yeah, I do. And not really here, but in the house where I grew up in Ireland, lots and lots of vinyl records and even more CDs. I have a fairly big record collection and it's quite eclectic, I have to say. I have classical music, folk, rock, jazz, pop, you name it. And I'm quite proud of my collection. And even though it's of no use to me now because I never listen to it, I don't want to part with it. To part with something is to give it up, to give it away, to sell it. I don't want to. Do you think I should?
No, I regret selling the records I had. I had also quite a wide selection of music on vinyl records. And I really enjoyed the ritual, let's say, of taking the vinyl record out of the sleeve, which is the cover, and maybe reading what's on the cover and cleaning the record and putting it on the turntable. I really enjoyed that process. And yes, it's time consuming. It's much easier to click something on your phone and listen via Bluetooth, but it's not the same. It's not the same feeling. You don't get the crackle of the needle hitting the vinyl. So there's something very special about vinyl that maybe people who were born in the digital age would not appreciate.
I totally get where you're coming from. I tell you what, you've just given me an idea, actually. We didn't plan this in advance. Would it be all right if I somehow attached to the show notes here a poem I wrote?
Of course.
Quite a few years ago about vinyl records. I actually wrote a poem about it, which I'm quite proud of.
Okay, yes.
Shall I attach it to the show notes?
Put it in the show notes.
And listeners, get back to me and let me know what you think. It's a poem about vinyl records. Well, partly about vinyl records.
So not only will you be able to read Reza's poem if you go to the show notes, but of course you will also see all of the vocabulary that we've been speaking about at inglespodcast.com/599.
Craig, would you call yourself an impatient person or a patient person?
It depends what.
Okay, yes. I should have known. Chocolate biscuits, impatient. Right. Other things, more patient, right?
It depends.
What I'm getting at, that means this conversation is going towards gratification. Quite often people talk about now the obsession with instant gratification as opposed to delayed gratification. In the past, you had to wait a lot longer for gratification. You couldn't just get things. You want something on the internet, buy it, order your food on a delivery app and it comes within minutes. No. You had to wait to be gratified. Yeah. What do you think about that?
Yeah, it's true. It's true. I am definitely instant gratification with most things. I like to have things now. So I don't like waiting for things. I tend to be instantaneous with many things. What about you?
It depends what it is. Generally, like most people, I prefer instant gratification. But sometimes forcing yourself to wait for something can give a lot of pleasure. For example, sometimes I really fancy a chocolate biscuit, but I think, you know what? No, I'm gonna do another hour of correcting writings first. Then I'll have it. I could have it now. It's right in front of me, but no. I will wait. I will delay the gratification. And then when I eat that biscuit, it seems to taste even better.
I do the same thing. Sometimes I'll say I really want to eat that chocolate biscuit and I'll say, no, I'll wait 3 seconds and then I'll eat it. Shopping. is another important area in which things have changed over time. Back in the day, we used to go shopping more often on the high street. We had neighborhood stores where we used to go in and we would speak to the person behind the counter and have a chat. And these days, more people are shopping online using Amazon and other shopping platforms and getting their products delivered.
I would actually add a third aspect to that. Apart from shopping on the high street, shopping in out-of-town shopping centres. If anything, they've taken over the high street if you want face-to-face contact. So you don't find that many people now in the city centre. You'll find more people in the huge shopping centres 5 or 10 miles outside the city.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's where the bargains are to be had. So your shopping will be cheaper if you go to these big shopping malls and hypermarkets. I quite like online shopping. I think it's more convenient. There's a wider selection of products usually. You don't have to deal with rude, impolite sales assistants that sometimes you come across, which means you find in Valencia. I think we've both got stories about that. So yeah, I prefer shopping online.
Craig, social media, as we all know, has changed life a lot. So social media is done using internet. What about face-to-face socializing? Do you think it's slowly disappearing because of social media?
To a certain extent, although I'm quite pleased to say that it doesn't seem to be happening as quickly here in Spain. I think the Spanish do tend to value social connection and socializing, meeting up face to face. So I don't think it's had such an impact here, but I'm not sure about other countries. The US comes to mind. I think in America, it's more common to socialize online. What do you think?
Yes, I think so. Don't know why, but it's just a fact. Yeah. Some countries it happens more than others. Craig, we were joking earlier about the workmen and how they show up. That means appear when they want. They're supposed to come every day to do this work in my block of flats, but they don't. And from what I read, jobs like that seem to be pretty secure for the future because AI can't really do that type of work, which in the case of my block of flats, by the way, is installing an elevator. But AI can do lots of other jobs. So you better start looking for a more flexible line of work in the future. Jobs for life, there are not going to be many of those in the future. Workmen may be okay. Plumbers, mechanics, things like that for a while. But administrative workers, oof, their days are numbered, I would say. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree with that. I think with AI, people who use AI in their job, if they are a white collar worker, meaning they tend to work in offices and do clerical work, if they're using AI and they take it on board, which means they accept it and use it, I think they'll be okay. It's the people who decide not to use it, people who reject it, that are going to have problems. And of course, if you really want to go up in the world, it's good to work with elevators.
Oh, very good. Very good.
Okay, so based on what we have discussed, based on our discussion and the opinions that we have offered, is life today better or worse than it was 30 years ago, 50, 100 years ago? We've given pros and cons for some of these. What do you think, Reza?
Well, Craig, for me, it depends when. In my opinion, it depends on what aspect. There are aspects which were better and there are aspects which were worse. And also, it depends on when you're talking. I wouldn't have minded at all being a fully grown adult 50 years ago. I wasn't. I was a kid. But it wouldn't have bothered me. I think I would have been happy enough. But I wouldn't have been so happy to be a fully grown adult 100 years ago.
Well, we spoke recently about life expectancy, so that's one area. You die about 25 years sooner, probably.
Yeah. So 100 years ago, and if I had been born in about 1900, that would mean that I would have lived through probably a couple of world wars. That wouldn't be particularly nice.
No.
So it depends when. But 50 years ago, 50 years ago, 60 years ago, so the 60s, 70s, I think that was a pretty cool time to live in Europe. Anyway, in many ways it was better, but in some ways it was worse. It depends on the aspect and it depends on the time period, I think. How do you see it?
I know that you really would have liked to have lived in the 60s, 68, 69.
Well, yeah, to have been a young adult then.
A young
I would have
adult.
been born about 1950. That for me, like boomers, they had it so lucky. To be born about 1950, they were jammy. Jammy means very, very lucky.
Yeah, for me, I'm quite happy now. I like the world the way it is. I like having the internet. I like the efficiency of communication that we have now. I like the health that's improved incredibly, even over the last 60 years, 50 years. We've had incredible advances in medicine and health. So I'm quite happy with the way things are now. But we'll see what happens in the future.
And Craig, do you think countries or even ideas of social movements, fashions, do you think everything has like a golden age? In Spain, in Spanish history, they talk about La Edad de Oro. And it's a period in Spanish history which is considered the greatest days of Spanish history.
And when was that?
That was kind of not long after discovering America. So Spain were the bee's knees. They were the first global superpower, really, if you think about it. They were the days for Spain. Many people might say for the UK, it was perhaps the
days of the empire?
The 19th century, maybe early 20th century, up to them. Yeah. When not far off, about 20% of the globe was under British control, you know. Do you think every country, idea, movement has its golden age?
Yes, with the examples that you've given, but I think everybody thinks that life was better when they were younger. If you listen to us speaking, very often we'll say, oh no, when we were younger, things were much better. My dad used to say the same thing. My grandfather, my grandmother would say the same thing. Oh, when I was a girl or when I was a boy, back in the day, things were much... Everybody thinks that. Maybe because when we're younger, we tend to be happier. We have less responsibility. And when we get older, yeah, it doesn't seem as good as it used to be. So maybe everybody thinks that way.
Oh, and I mentioned the wars, the First and Second World War. Could there be a third World War? Is history cyclical? Are there cycles? Is there going to be another World War or a big war? Or are those two wars a thing of the past? Could they happen again?
I think there's two questions there. So yes, I think history is cyclical. I think things do come around in a circular way, and we have been going through an uptick, which is a really good, prosperous, fantastic time since the end of the Second World War, probably until the end of the century. And I think now we're kind of going down, unfortunately, into a down point in the West. But
in the West, but not all of the world.
Not all of the world, no. But as far as wars are concerned, I think there will be conflicts, but not as global. I don't think we'll be shooting each other and fighting as we did globally in the Second World War. I think it's going to be more based online. I think there's going to be cyber wars and things like that. What's your opinion?
Yeah, I think you're right. In fact, I think there already are cyber wars, basically.
On that happy note, we would like to know what you think. It's your turn to practice your English. Do you agree with the things we've said, or do you have a different view? If you were born into a digital world, would you like to have grown up in an analog world like Reza and I? Let us know. How can people send us voice messages, Reza?
You can record your voice using SpeakPipe. There's a link in the show notes. It's speakpipe.com/inglespodcast. Or if you like, you could send us an email either to craig@inglespodcast.com or belfastreza@gmail.com.
And if you're a Spanish speaker and you would like to improve your English with free and paid resources, visit the Mansion Inglés website at mansioningles.com. And for paid products, you can browse the online store at store.mansioningles.net.
As always, we'd like to say thank you to all of our Patreon supporters. If you're interested, you could join the Patreon program. It's a way of donating money to the podcast, and as a way of saying thank you to sponsors, you get instant access to audio transcriptions of the podcast and also the possibility of a live Zoom chat so that you can practice your speaking. There's a link in the show notes. It's patreon.com/inglespodcast.
And unfortunately, we can't mention everybody who's supporting us on Patreon, but we will say hello and thank you to our more recent supporters who have joined this month. And they are A Reina, which translates as a queen, doesn't it? Yes. A Reina, Romeo da Costa, Yolanda, and friend of the show, Vanessa. Hi, Vanessa. Vanessa Martinez. In next week's episode, Reza, what are we discussing?
New words that have recently become common in English.
So if you want to keep up to date with your English vocabulary, listen next week and we'll share some new words that have been added to the dictionary. Until then, thank you for listening this week. Have a wonderful week ahead. And until next time, it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from me.
If you enjoyed this podcast, you could really help us if you tell your friends so that more people can listen. And we remind you that the music this week is by Hits. The track is called See You Later.